Our guest in this segment is a friend on the show, Chris Miller, who has been with us on numerous occasions as a candidate, as a person who has put together drives to get items to take to the flood-ravaged parts of the state, and as a businessman, too. Chris, good morning. Thank you so much for being with us on the show.
Gentlemen, good morning. How are you guys?
We are splendid, except for Mr. Gilstrap, who's playing hurt today. Back pain. He's got some back surgery.
What do you do?
I got old enough to require back surgery.
That's great.
Aging is a game of attrition.
I understand completely. I'm 46 years old and still box, and I will tell you, the old body does not heal like it used to.
Well, you go and get punched in the face on purpose. You're going to expect a certain amount of injury, right?
And even when you're pretty good at moving your head and controlling distance, I mean, your knees and your lower back will hurt.
That's the truth. That's the part about getting older. I remember playing in an indoor soccer league for over 30. At the time, I was 40, and I can remember. You see the ball, and your brain thinks that you can get to the ball, but your legs don't take you there. And it doesn't matter how good a shape you're in. They don't respond like they did when you were 26, do they, Chris?
That is exactly correct.
Chris,
oh, my gosh.
Chris, as someone who's a year older than you, I hope you take my advice. It's time to trade that punching bag for a pickleball paddle.
Well, have you been talking to my wife?
Very much so.
That might be a step too far from boxing to pickleball. You have to have like tennis or something in the middle.
Yeah, shouldn't there be something more active in between?
Yeah. Oh, man. Well, I keep doing what I do, and I love it. I'll wind up, helping people train, and still it's good exercise. But, like we said earlier, the old body doesn't heal like it used to, and the reaction time's not the same. And here's the shocker of it all. Apparently you have to stretch and lengthen your body on a regular basis. And I wasn't aware of that one for the past 46 years.
I'm just thinking of Chris's Burgess Meredith, with the stocking cap,
Chase the chicken. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Chris,
I kid you not. I'd walk in the gym sometimes without, ever warming up, just get right in the ring and start sparring.
Bad idea.
And that was up until I was like, yeah, right, exactly right. That's why I had a bunch of injuries and had to have surgery.
Yeah, man.
So here we are. Anyway, let's talk tariffs.
Yeah, let's talk how it affects the auto industry. And I know there was a court order in New York to pull the plug on tariffs for the time being. Who knows what happens at the next level of appeals? But I've heard all sorts of national reports about what buyers should now expect when they go to purchase a car. And that is, don't expect the great deals you might have gotten a year ago. Things are a little bit tighter. So tell me how tariffs affect the auto industry. And first, set the table for everybody about how many different auto dealerships that you folks are involved in at the Dutch Miller Auto Group, Chris.
Oh, boy. So I've got 13 different automobile dealerships and then 3 additional used car lots. So that's, 16 different locations. The franchises that we represent are Kia, Chevrolet, Hyundai, Nissan, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Ford, Subaru. And so there are domestic and international franchises we represent. And, there's perception, there's reality, and then there's facts. And, what we're seeing is when the tariff announcements first hit, people kind of got scared and scrambled, and it led to kind of a rush out where people were going out and buying cars because they were worried they'd have to pay 25% 6 months later on. There's a natural trade cycle, and everybody about 2.5 to 3 years is looking to buy a new car. That's kind of the natural order of things. And so it accelerated up the buying decisions for a little bit. The other counter to this is that when we dig into the facts, my industry, if I was a betting guy, is not going to be affected by this the way that people think. And let me give you an example. Every single one of the domestic manufacturers, Ford, Chrysler, which has a Ram truck, and then Chevrolet and GMC, which is General Motors, they all manufacture their trucks in Mexico. And so there's no way that they're going to put a 25% tariff, which is what was proposed when they got shot, on trucks coming from Mexico, because it would kill the market. And it is such a large player in the overall driver of the economy, especially when you factor in everything that the auto industry touches. It also takes billions upon billions of dollars to stop manufacturing in Mexico, find a new location point in the United States, build and open up and start manufacturing trucks here. So what Trump is looking for is the deal. This is all leverage in the deal, and he will systematically go industry by industry and strip away tariffs once the deal happens. Now, in the ruling that occurred yesterday, the thing that's left off is, and this is where the facts come into play, that was nothing more than a ruling based on an interpretation of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act that they were looking at putting tariffs just on Mexico, Canada, 10% across the board on all other countries, and then anybody that is trafficking fentanyl as a punishment. The thing that is not being mentioned that is still in effect is the reciprocal tariffs that go into effect on July the 9th around the world, and that is inside the purview of the executive branch. So there is still a large segment of tariffs that will go into effect on July the 9th that is reciprocal, which is that if a country charges us the 30% tariff, we're going to charge them a 30% tariff. So that stuff's still on the board. And that was interesting to me reading all the articles and then listening to all the reporting about the court ruling yesterday, because like all this stuff falls underneath Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, which covers auto, steel, and aluminum. And they still have leeway to be able to do whatever they want there. The court ruling was a lawsuit brought by the Liberty Justice Center from 12 Democratic states to challenge just the Mexico, the Canada, and the fentanyl trafficking thing. So, like, it's still to be determined. This thing's not over, and that ruling can go up to the Supreme Court, but the other reciprocal tariffs that are planned to go into place are not impacted by this court ruling at all. But thinking about what is going to happen, you can't do a lot of this stuff. This is all leading to what is going to be the deal. And he's looking for deals, and he's looking for recommitments of investment back into the United States. And the ones that are willing to do that and play along with it, you're going to have easing up in industry by industry and country by country based on that. That's kind of what I see happening. Now, the fear of stuff we're already seeing driving up used car prices. So that's going to be interesting, because what that means to customers is their used car that they want to trade in is actually worth more. And so that actually benefits them. The manufacturers have inked up their prices because of inflation. And also, let's be honest, they're probably doing this because of the market fear of tariffs. And so that kind of leads to, just like when you have gasoline, right, and the cost of a barrel of oil goes up and immediately see an increase in the pumps, even though what is in the pumps has nothing to do with the oil that's going to be bought tomorrow at the new price. So there's a little bit of that going on here too. But at the end of the day, it's all going to balance out. And over time, I think it's all going to work out.
Chris,
but
quickly,
right now,
have any of the cars that you sell that are, even the imports, have they at all been affected by a tariff at this time?
No.
Very good. John, your question.
Nothing has been hit by tariffs yet that has raised costs by 10 to 25%.
But aren't we going to see this, if only as an excuse, we're going to see inflationary pressure on cars from not from your dealerships necessarily, from other dealerships who say, well, you know, it costs more, so therefore we have to charge you more money and therefore increase the profits?
Totally natural. And what happens there is that you've got the manufacturers are the ones that set the prices. So the manufacturers set what the vehicle costs and then also what the dealer can sell it for. And they are squeezing our margins, by the way. But that's neither here nor there. They have, through COVID, through money that we've pumped into the economic system, through COVID recovery, and through inflation that has been impacted because of the supply chain stuff, all of those things go into what their operational costs are. And so they look at that and go, we have to raise prices. But what they're doing is that they're going to raise it based on what the market can bear, too, because they don't want to go out of business. So there's this balancing act that they're working through. So they have raised prices, but it's been more in response to the increased cost that everybody's experienced through the pandemic, through the printing of money, and through the inflation from the disruption of the supply chain. So prices on new vehicles have gone up, but nothing near like what people are anticipating when it comes to a 10% or a 25% tariff, or even larger depending on the country.
Matt Harvey.
So when it comes to financing, how has that? What's the current state of that when someone goes to finance a new or used vehicle?
That's a good question.
With rates.
So rates are higher, and rates are higher for a particular reason, because what sets rates is the Federal Reserve creates a policy, and then they buy and sell 10-year Treasury securities to get the market to the rate that they want to set to control inflation. Because the Fed's number one directive is to control price increases and inflation. And so that has led to an uptick in interest rates, but also the market itself, if the rates are too low, they're not going to buy the Treasury security. So like rates have not gone down as much as the Fed has wanted, because the market has gone like, we can't make as much money because of the increase in prices and inflation with rates here, so it's got to be kind of here. That's where the market comes in to bid up the value of the Treasury securities. And I hope what I'm saying makes sense. It makes sense in my head, but the rates are up. They have gone down, but they're nowhere near as low as they were in 2019.
Does that?
So
I was going to say, does that incentivize the manufacturers to provide some sort of buying incentive?
Yes, it does. And it's all going to be based on what they're able to produce versus what they're able to sell, and they have to get rid of all of their inventory. So if they're a little slower, then their incentives uptick. So we do see a lot of 0%, 0.9%, and other incentivized rates under 4% by several different manufacturers. All of them have incentivized rates on certain models in some way, shape, or form. But where the incentivized rates come into place is that they may have, like, let me just give you an example. There may be 2,500 additional Nissan Versas in the market that they need to get rid of, and so they incentivize that. And so where their incentives come into play is going to be with rebates or interest rates based on what they need to get rid of. It's not broad and across the board.
So let's just assume that these tariffs do kick in at 25%. As a consumer next year, what would the market look like, and how are the manufacturers and the dealers going to respond to that issue?
It would be terrible. If you think about what's happened to the cost of cars just over the past 20 years anyway, it would be terrible to have an immediate 25% increase. In particular, where that 25% increase would come into play is stuff that is built outside of the United States. Lots of these cars are still built inside of the United States. Subaru, Nissan, Hyundai, Toyota, Honda, they manufacture some of their cars inside of the United States. So it would be on the stuff that is brought in. So if you've got a 25% tariff that hits a transmission but doesn't hit the final product, then you're not going to look at a 25% cost increase totally. You're going to look at 25% of the cost of a $3,000 transmission.
Okay.
So it's not going to be like all of these prices are going to go up across the board by 25%.
Chris,
that's why I brought up. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, no, that's fine. Finish your sentence, please.
That's why I brought up the trucks that are all manufactured in Mexico, because that is a large segment of the market. And if all of those experienced a 25% increase, that would be devastating to profits and devastating to the economic activity and devastating to the consumer who wants to buy that, because they wouldn't be able to buy as much of them.
But also devastating to the host country, Mexico.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So there's probably going to be some, we're talking about you talked about the deal. I think it's probably going to go beyond the scope of a financial deal. It probably will require Mexico to secure the border and to combat the fentanyl that's coming across as well.
Now we're reading the tea leaves right. That is exactly correct, and that's what some of this stuff is about.
Chris Miller is our guest here, the Dutch Miller Auto Group. And Chris, the furthest north dealership you have is located where? Because I know you're not in the Eastern Panhandle.
Furthest north, Ripley, West Virginia. I'm not in the Eastern Panhandle. I'm not in the Morgantown market. So
right.
I've got Huntington, Charleston, Ripley, Beckley, and then I've got stuff in Virginia and Tennessee and North Carolina.
All right, John?
Cars cost so much money now. We're a Jeep family. My wife has a Cherokee and I have a Wrangler. We're at a dealership and I saw a Jeep Rubicon for $105,000.
Okay.
I mean, if I was spending $100,000 for a car, it ain't going to be a Rubicon. But I do have a question for you.
Agreed.
There's a lot of pressure. We sat down to buy her car, which is not $100,000, to do financing, and we told the guy we wanted to pay cash for a car, right? Decreasing asset. And there was a lot of pressure to sort of explain, well, you can always pay it off tomorrow. So what is the pressure? What is the benefit for the dealership in getting some kind of financing on a car?
So it's kind of like buying eggs. And if you buy eggs one at a time, the egg costs more than if you buy them 20 dozen at a time. And so all of these car dealerships basically package and broker loans. And so they are able to get a cheaper rate than you most of the time can going directly to your bank. And they make the difference in the markup or the spread. And so the longer that you keep that loan with that bank, the more money that they make. But a majority of those bank loans are structured with called a zero prepayment penalty, which means that you're only paying interest for the time that you're utilizing the loan. So if you do finance it and then pay it off in cash in 6 months, then you're only paying the interest of that 6-month time period. So that's kind of what they're trying to get you to do. Even if they're not able to pick up the full amount of the financing, if they're able to make an extra $250, when margins are tight, that's something that that helps them. So that's really what's going on there.
Yeah. Okay.
And the other thing is when you're talking about $100,000 Jeeps, you probably are talking about a crazy lift on it and an upgraded supercharged engine.
Oh, it was a hot looking Jeep,
yeah.
But it doesn't come with a divorce attorney.
No, yeah.
Oh, now that's expensive.
Nor does it come with a gas card.
Yeah, I saw a couple summers ago. My son's car got taken out by a drunk driver. Fortunately, he did not have any injuries, obviously. But the search for a used car to replace it, a dealership said if you paid cash, you would pay a 10% surcharge for cash if you did not go through their financing. That was the first time I'd ever heard of that, Chris, because the salesman said, "Listen, we make our money on the back end."
That's honest.
That sounds illegal to me. And what those are called is non-disclosed finance charges. The price is the same paying cash or financing it, or you run into major problems with the feds. And I don't want to play in that arena. I'll tell you that much. I also think that's mistreating people.
I would agree.
Is that law unique to vehicles? Because it happens here in restaurants and places.
Yeah,
that's different when it comes to credit cards and the credit card processing fee. There have been rules that have been changed that allow that processing fee to be passed on to the consumer.
Hey,
that's different than buying a vehicle or a house and having to pay more money because you're not financing.
So I have a question not about tariffs. With the popularity of electric vehicles rising, and maybe it's peaked, but whatever, but the introduction of them into the market, how has that affected the used car market?
That's an interesting question. So what we have seen, first off, addressing the EV side of stuff, we have seen people that have an interest in buying an electric vehicle as a second car, not the one that they take family trips on, or not the primary one that they load the kids up to go to school in, but one that somebody's using just to go back and forth to work because it saves them overall money. Now, we're going to see a change in the incentives on electric vehicles because they're heavily incentivized. And the new tax bill has partially changed that. There were large deductions, tax deductions on electric vehicles.
Like $7,500.
Yes. Now, those deductions have been replaced on deductions on all vehicles for all people that make $200,000 or less. And so the deduction of interest over the first several years and partially on the car payment is a new part of this tax law that's just passed. So the details are all going to be clarified, but it was an interesting move because the only people that were really buying EVs were, well-to-do people. And so what they decided to do was they decided to eliminate that huge tax credit just for that particular sector and apply it to everybody across the board. So it doesn't matter if you're buying a $20,000 Nissan Versa or a, $60,000 loaded up Kia Optima. None of that stuff matters now if you make less than $200,000 a year, then your interest in a part of your car payment is now deductible, as opposed to just being incentivized for buying an electric vehicle.
Chris, about a minute to go here. I understand that plug-in hybrids are the happy middle ground for those who aren't willing to go fully electrical.
That is very, very accurate, and they're very smart and safe. And we're also going to see a pop-up in hydrogen vehicles here pretty soon.
Hydrogen?
There's a company. There's a company in France that has now finalized this. It is a hydrogen vehicle that you charge in 3 minutes fully, and it's got better range than EV vehicles, and that's going to come into the market as they start figuring out this technology. So,
does it have water come pouring out of the engine?
Do we have time to get back to my?
Out of the exhaust. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. Chris, we are just about out of time. I thank you so much for yours. Appreciate your insight into the auto industry this morning.
Guys, thanks so much for having me on, and I'll do it again anytime you need me.
Call you up on that one. Hey, and stay out of the boxing ring, buddy. Be safe.
I appreciate it.
Have a good day.
I don't think he's going to take your advice, Rob.
I don't think he is either. Chris, thank you so much, sir.
Good for him.
See you.